Hello strategy gaming enthusiasts, my name is AlzaboHD, and in today's video we are going to restore the Roman Empire as the most attractive Welshman of the HWE. Fellow CK3 tubers Snap Strategy and Ottawa Welshmen have given me a genetic monstrosity and successor of Magnus Maximus, a legend of Wales with the blood of Roman emperors. Of course, forming Rome as a massive sheep sovereignty is easy, so we'll spice things up by invading China, inbreeding our way to pure-blooded progeny, and ensuring that we leave the world a better place for Liew and Zahl, the final two YouTubers unfortunate enough to play after we're done putting the pain in this CK3 campaign. Our story starts with Prince Bucktooth of the Morganwong Adventurers, a 36-year-old landless adventurer who likes to drink, shatter mirrors, and is loaded with gold doubloons and claims over the Holy Welsh Imperium. Perhaps it is irony or the act of a vengeful god that decided his die-looker name, but all the same he set out immediately to find a way to hide his skin suit from the judgment of the outside world. Growing a massive beard is probably the best play. Drip Jesus is not a bad look, and he set out to rechristen the name of his wise men to the Beardmaxer Brethren. Every man was thus given the option to beard up or bounce out, and instead of milking his one-year-old son and sovereign, Die-Looker set out to hunt for more dangerous game. Not even 48 days into his campaign, Bucktooth bravely charged into a wolf and died instantly, leaving behind his company to his 8-year-old daughter, Dayway. At least, the beast's head could serve as decoration, but this dire and tragic outcome would lead to a split in the timeline that would forever change the course of human history. With neither a beard nor a Y chromosome, Bucktooth's daughter, Dayway, retitled her company to honor the felling of her late father, naming the fellowship the Wolf Widow Wanderers. What life awaited our little lass? Would she follow her mother and become French? The customs of medieval Europe meant that her child's status would prevent her from partaking in any activity, well, most activities. Extracurricular murder was child labor approved, and her French mother taught her in the way of the blade. Unfortunately, little girls are bad at targeted assassinations, and with her scheme uncovered, the attempt failed, and our child was chastised for her incompetence. It is said that little hands are better suited for agricultural lands, and our mini Maiden single-handedly harvested more than 800 apples for her company. But unlike her brother Emperor Oisín, Dayway yearned for an existence outside of Europe. She sought a name and a legacy far to the east of the Holy Welsh Empire, and to that effect used her ethically sourced apples to feed an expedition to southeastern France. Her lust for land knew no bounds, and by horse she rode far and wide to understand the power that's inside. By the age of 11, she was already the house head of the Gwent dynasty, and used her position to diligently recruit followers across the fiefdoms of the Welsh Imperium. Ethically procured, homeless women could thus aid our hero in employment opportunities, but failure haunted our petite protagonist around every corner. Murder and kidnapping were not her true calling, and thus our motivated maiden set off to the east towards Greece for economic and youth employment opportunities. There, she manipulated the Arabs of Crete into giving ducats and dinner for her fellowship, and was further entrusted to escort emissaries to the Holy Land, where she delivered gemstones to the Umayyad Caliph. For some unknown reason, these men were happy to learn military strategy from our preteen protagonist, and the women of the Wolf Widow Wanderers used this currency to employ siege weaponry. Like most children her age, Dayway spent her youth providing private military services to foreign heads of state, which, in turn, awarded her the apples needed to sail towards Somalia. Dayway took to the sea and would seize this opportunity to go even further, culminating in her coming of age upon the coast of Yemen. Back in Europe, the Holy Welsh Empire had fragmented under incompetence and carling French invasion, and our maiden's emperor brother could not be trusted to carry on the Welsh tradition. With expired edibles in hand, our mistress thus left the continent for new land with her widow band, hiring landmen and seamen on her way east yet again. Her first experience in India was rather unpleasant. How could she slap me for taking some apples? But thankfully, naked volunteers filled up the ranks of Dewey's private military. Even Obama Yo Mama, joined our Welsh wanderers as a quartermaster, and the group traveled onwards and upwards through South Asia. As an artifact courier transport company, the Wolf Widows waded northwards through the jungles towards Tibet, aiding nudist Nepalese and beating Yemenis in a contest of fisticuffs. Leopards would not eat our lass's face. It was sad enough already, and after wrestling the beast, Dewey arrived in Tibet, ready to party. Buddhism teaches us that existence is suffering, and suffering is sobriety, so our sovereign drunkenly recruited soldiers into a personal army that now numbered nearly 2,000 men. When she wasn't hunting for manpower, our maiden was hunting for her brother's heart in the art of peacocking, and soon Dai Looker was to be a sibling with benefits. Love is blind, particularly within the Morganwong dynasty, but as an adult woman, we would need to carry legitimate lineage, and thus the most attractive man in Lhasa was to be wed to our pretty protagonist. Not everyone was happy with this arrangement, but pregnancy is now a priority, and fraternal affection would come another day. It turns out the indigenous religion of the Tibetan people is not impossible to adopt as a religion when your husband knows the way, and at the age of 18, Dewey converted to Buddhism. The road to samsara is paved on the suffering of subsequent secondary scaly husbands, and enlightenment through pilgrimage emboldened our faith in the fivefold path. Obama was also imprisoned. Dewey became a wise woman, and she had obtained the fame and force needed to stake her claim and satisfy her lust for land. The West had fallen, and billions must fry, so the Wolf Widow Wanderers sought to revive Wales halfway across the world. In 1005 AD, war was thus declared for Kham in a bid to create a Welsh state on the Tibetan plateau. Around 2,000 soldiers of nudist Nepalese pedigree were thus called to arms in Lhasa, but land was not the only thing for which Our Lady lusted. Her brother-lover and fellow fornicator, Dai Looker, had incestuously entered her Welsh womb, and Dewey was pregnant, news she would soon share without care to her personal reputation. Traditions are important, even halfway across the world, and Gwerch Furch, the hunchbacked daughter-niece, slithered onto the scene as the crown heir, but the drums of war called for more pertinent matters. Banbar would be the first city to fall to the Wolf Widow Wanderers, and the problem of starvation and army attrition was solved by forced conscription behind enemy lines. Dewey's sibling sexuality has made her a disgrace to the entire dynasty, but on the field of battle, Tibetan territories fell under Welsh occupation. Far to the west, the Italian kingdom also fell to our uncle Sion, who was now the new head of the Gwent dynasty, yet Dewey's eyes never strayed from her bromance, which produced yet another pure-blooded progeny. With more and more occupied lands, it was time for our teenager to find a home for her Welsh Buddhist brethren, and in 1009 AD, Qamdo was captured, which in turn made Dewey independent chiefess of the first Asian Welsh nation. Princess Bucktooth's first order of state was to increase her own crown authority, which stripped the native Tibetans of their lands and centralized her personal power. Native artifacts were made into ducats, civilization arrived in the form of infrastructure, and surprisingly, Dewey married a spouse that was not her sibling. Gwerch, Gwiggle, and the entire family were happy in married matrimony, and it was high time to party. The strength of both her polity and character permitted Our Lady to become a conqueror, and the bodies were about to hit the proverbial floor. RNGesus had blessed our chiefess with ambition and ability, and a personal army of catapults and heavy infantry awaited further instruction. The cultural capital of Lhasa is a logical choice for legitimizing the Welsh-Tibetan realm, and in 1010 AD, war was declared for the duchy in its entirety. Executing Tibetans is a well-known method for obtaining piety, and unfortunately for Dewey's husband King, his son and heir would fall to the same scheme.
This marriage was not going to last between our lesbian affairs and recurrent sibling impregnation, and everyone would know Argagugaglaglaglaglab's real father. Lhasa land was occupied by Welsh hand, and the polity must expand. So great was Daewei's love for her brother that she renamed the holiest site of Tibetan Buddhism in his honor and made the county her new crown capital. Our family bond was strong and of stable seed, thus Daewei bade her French mother gesture to instruct the coming generation of Welsh Tibetans. Now her brother could live next door in Nyamo, but Buddhism was yet unreformed and needed consolidation. Qamdo would have to go, a grand temple would soon grow, and the Western Welsh had fallen to Franco-depravity as an unholy hybridized culture. Yet another war was over, and a light sprinkling of child sacrifice commemorated the annexation of her hated husband's nation. Time to get sloppy and slither towards the second holy site of Sagya, itself barely a speed bump in a long chain of human sacrifice and the salvation of less civilized nations. The white woman's burden was grave indeed, and upon the death of her non-dynastic beard, she found a spare that was as handsome as her hidden brother lover. The evil Nepalese took advantage of her weakened state and opened a second front which forced Daewei to cede land in surrender, but Buddha was on her side, and the country could almost be considered contiguous. Between bouts of familial venereal disease, Our Lady traveled the world to pray for piety and wash away her sins. Human resources provided prayer points, and song made Qamdo whole, allowing our wise woman to form the titular duchy, while Day got lucky and juiced his sister for the 4th time in a row. Money means mercenaries, daughters mean alliances, and Turgle means the consequences of our actions. There's a 5th sibling seed in the oven, and God had left the building, leaving behind a wake of depravity as the horny heathen army murdered and sacked their way across the western steppes. 6 years of starvation and attrition resulted in tentacular border gore, and yet more piety, provinces, livestock, and land embraced the Welsh brand. Through her Tibetan husband, Daewei was able to convert to nachos and embrace indigenous drip, and with over 7,000 piety, Nirvana was in bloom and upon the horizon. Our Duchess set off for 2 journeys upon the fivefold path, and when she returns, the fate of Eastern faith would change forever. No longer would our people believe in primitive superstition or be held back by inbred prohibition, and in 1030 AD, the new religion of Tantric familius was proclaimed throughout our polity. Every sibling seed is sacred, the details aren't important, and world peace would be enforced through force, as TF is the one true faith. Great purifications and genetic aberrations were on the way, and Daewei demanded everyone convert under penalty of reincarnation. Our great nation was deserving of fraternal redecoration, and the Duchy of Qamdo thus became Diapolis. Tu casa es mi casa, and rebellion threatened the territorial integrity of our One China policy. Re-education via violence is the only solution, but the rebels start coming and they don't stop coming, so we'll hit the ground running towards routing these radicals and establishing lasting peace. The ransom of these princes enriched our princess to the point where she could form her first queendom, and by 1033 AD, her Welsh rhapsody led to a kingdom of loathing. Finally, we could eat something that wasn't yak, and soon Daewei was on the attack yet again, this time for the titles of her late husband. As a 420 friendly feminist witch, our jealous queen murdered her brother lover's wife so that she could take his life in marriage, to which he readily agreed. Qamdo was ours, well, more accurately, our brother-nephews and daughter-nieces, and it was time for our 4-month-long grand marriage ceremony. This union between the repulsive and the hideous really brought the Gwent dynasty together, and it was a joy to have Gwiggle watch while Daewei and Dai consummated their union. Thank you all for coming. Even the Tantric Lama paid his regards, and the following years meant more war, inbreeding of her direct descendants, and expansion. Frankly speaking, our dynasty was so blue-blooded by now that it was time for a rebranding of name, motto, and crest to reflect our cognitive abilities. Thankfully, war in CK3 doesn't require much thought either, and China fell to the Welsh dragon. The Han were evicted from their land, and our club-footed, hunchbacked brethren populated the steppes. More war fed her fiefdom the clay needed for legendary fame, but Dewey's son-nephew Turgle had fallen in battle, and her own battle with her meat vehicle resulted in our queen falling into infirmity. She would need her brother now more than ever, but at least the Brythonic language was spreading across the world. Everyone else would bend the knee to Diapolan hegemony, and a white peace with India allowed our monarch to collect her thoughts and curry out her next plan.
It is now 1049 AD, and the cultural acceptance between Welsh and Sumpa had reached 40%, effectively meaning that we could now hybridize our sibling sapiens with the native Tibetans. These Welsh Tibetans would thus become egalitarian with the Tibetan heritage and the Brythonic language, while preserving the plurality of their respective traditions. Princess Dewey of Diapolis reformed her nation into a new era of cross-cultural interactions, and her slithering sum of inbred nephews and nieces were now Tibetan in name and Welsh under the cushions. Sharing is caring, and the Dalai Lama lore would soon be supplanted by Welsh shagging, but not everyone was on board. Old Tibetan Nacho nationalists, led by a white man, declared independence, and in the fighting, the Queen's brother-lover and husband fell under unfriendly fire. The namesake of our kingdom and figurehead of the nation had finally died, and though the war was over, this was the end of an era. Grief affects everyone differently, and our consexual protagonist processed hers by forging the three queendoms of Yu, Song, and Xia, and married her 18-year-old August's brother-in-law, despite being 64 years old. The further loss of her daughter-niece Argagluglab pushed her over the edge, and it was time to gather the realm and make an announcement. Diapolis, Qamdo, and Xia were to be united, and Dewey was thus crowned Empress of the newly reforged Tantric Welsh Empire. The world now had two Welsh empires, West and East, and though her daughter was dying of yeast, our maiden main character decided to abandon imperial ambition and her home by studying abroad for a semester in Rome. Traveling as an elderly empress isn't always easy, but it was a boat time Dewey revisited Europe and the continent of her birth. Unfortunately, studying Latin turned out to be harder than the amputated member of her late brother husband, and haunted by the stress of her past, she was headed to a graduation from both her pain and existence on this mortal plane. Ultimately, the Empress succeeded in obtaining her degree, but tragically was beaten by a Pakistani, delved into lunacy, and ironically died mere days away from her return to the imperial capital. Dewey was dead at the age of 71 in 1057 AD, leaving behind her empire in the talons of her hunchbacked inbred daughter-niece, Gwrch I. Before we pass off this lovely inbred Imperium to the next CK3 content creator, I'd like to quickly cover an overview of the world as it existed upon the day of Gwrch's coronation. Our queen is a 51-year-old homely, hunchbacked conqueror with surprisingly solid stats, and her only child is her son and heir Blurf, a 13-year-old with scoliosis and a face only a mother ant could love. Succession was smooth, and Miss Murgle directly controlled the Imperium with 12 titles, almost 3,000 ducats, plentiful prestige, and a personal army larger than any polity in Asia. The state religion of Tantric Familius predominates across the steppe, and is itself the 8th largest global faith, ahead of Nachos, from which it originally derived. The Welsh people are a minority on the steppes and exist only in the former capital of Qamdo, while the current capital of Diapolis contains the only enclave of Welsh Tibetan traditions. The royal court of the Tantric Welsh Imperium is the third most prestigious in the world. The Gwent dynasty has over 87 living members across 7 houses, of which ours is the most pronounceable, and Gwrch has 6 siblings which are also cousins, brothers-in-law, sisters-in-law, and a family tree that's more horizontal than vertical. While we might have spent our entire campaign spreading our name to Asia and beyond, our forefathers in Europe have been busy shagging territories of their own. Our uncle Oisín the Repulsive owns the remnant of the Holy Welsh Empire, which is present in England, France, Spain, Germany, and beyond, while our cousin dynasty and cadet branch has control over Italy, the Netherlands, and even Morocco. If we combined all holdings of House Gwent, we would have more than 26,000 soldiers and dominion over a quarter of the world's landmass, which would make uniting Rome easy peasy, lemon squeezy. The only relevant world powers outside of our brother-loving lineage are the Super Scots of Alba and Scandinavia, the Cretan-cultured Byzantine Empire, a Proto-Ottoman Turkic tribe led by a conqueror, and the Yaqubite Caliphate, whose fate would largely be a road bump for future Roman reunification. What would become of the Tantric Welsh Imperium and the Murghal dynasty? Destiny had at first decided that Koi Fish would take the reins, but without Heistein in game, he sailed for other CBs, so his friend and fellow YouTuber, DeFluve, will make his move by continuing the story of Gwrch, which you can check out in our CK3 Secession playlist. Be sure to also check out Snap Strategy and Ottawa Welshman's prequel videos, which further expand our dynastic Welsh lore. If you've made it this far, I'd like to thank you personally for participating in the algorithmic augmentation of the Alzabo Nation. It's been a while since I've uploaded, and I'm still alive, with content covering CK3, V3, and more coming later this month. You can support me, AlzaboHD, for free by liking this video, subscribing in solidarity, and letting me know what content you'd like to see in the future. If you've got buckets of ducats, consider joining my channel as a member or supporting me on Patreon for moral superiority and the ability to immortalize your name and stake your claim in the credits.